Hey guys, so I'm gonna make a quick video talking about how to apply birch bark to your arrows. In my case, I have this protective wooden sleeve over the binding on the front, and we're gonna put the birch bark right here to kind of help transition the sleeve onto the arrow shaft. Okay, so yeah, this isn't gonna be some sort of comprehensive video, so don't like think too deeply about what we're gonna do, but hopefully it's going to help people. So in order to do our birch bark, first thing we need to do is boil some water. Preferably a lot of water, you know. Okay, so once we get this boiling, I'll be right back. Okay, so now that the water's boiling, we're just going to throw in our birch bark. Okay, and now kind of like making pasta, we're just going to do this and let it boil for maybe I don't know, about 30 minutes, maybe, give or take a little bit. Kind of depends on how dry the birch bark was to begin with. So check back in with you guys once it's ready to go. Okay guys, so it's been about 30 minutes or so. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to turn that off and we're going to transfer it to our work surface. Just be back in a moment. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take each piece of birch bark out, place it on the surface right here. Ooh, sorry about that. This is why I was trying to keep the camera still. Anyways, so now what we need to do is take this, soak this through. Sorry about that, guys. If you're wondering why the water turns so yellow, it's a combination of the fact that the birch bark powder stuff, whatever that was already in the water, got kicked up, plus the fact that this towel was not necessarily the cleanest. You know, this is just kind of my scrap towel that I use for a lot of like archery related cleanup stuff and things like this. So I'm thinking probably the oils and grimes came out of it. But anyways, what I'm gonna do now is take this towel and lay it out flat so we can put the birch bark into the towel. So give me a moment to do that. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to lay these as flat as we can. The ones that curled up like this, I'm going to hold it down like this and lay it as flat as possible. And then what we're gonna do is basically roll the towel over everything and try to flatten everything, okay? So give me a moment to do that. So I have everything rolled up, like nice and flat in here. And what we're gonna do now is just kind of roll up the end like this and just let that sit for another maybe 5-10 minutes or so. We don't want this to completely go dry, okay? We just want it to, cool down just a little bit and hopefully flatten out the kind of curled up bits of the birch bark. Anyways, I'm gonna go clear out that water on the meanwhile because we need some more clean water. So the important part here is that we get the water to the point where it's not so hot that you can put you can't put your finger into it, but that it's like hot enough that you can't hold your hand in there for too long, okay? The reason is because if we get it to boiling again and we re-dip the bark's gonna re-curl up. So we need it to just be not like lukewarm, but that spot between like warm and hot so that we can use this to help soften the bark as necessary, okay? So I'm gonna transfer this back to my work surface and we're gonna start to apply the bark. Okay, so we got our water ready to go, got our cutting mat. I have a knife camera here that you might not be able to see. So now we're going to unroll this. It's been about, 10-ish minutes or so. Okay, and I'm gonna just kind of unfold this thing and little by little get one piece of bark out and cut it, apply the glue and start going forward, okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm measuring how much of the birch bark I'm gonna need, okay? I don't usually I'm not usually one who's too fussy about this kind of stuff, in the sense that I try to be like super duper precise and pre-measure everything. Not saying that if you are that type of person that you shouldn't do that. I mean, you should obviously do what works for you. But for me, it's usually enough just to kind of eyeball it like this. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay. And let me just clean up any weird bits on here. Put this back into the water. One thing you want to watch out for is when there's little cracks like this, because you want to cut this stuff off, or else the cracks can spread either kind of like horizontally or vertically. If it already has a crack like this, don't try to be a hero. Just cut it off, okay? It's not worth the hassle to try to save that little bit of bark, okay? Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to get the arrow ready, apply the glue, and show you what you guys need to do next, okay? Okay, so what we're gonna need now is some sort of glue. In this case, I'm using wood glue. And you need, ideally, some sort of flattening iron like this. This is like a very traditional one. They call this an indu in Korea. However, you can just use like a really hot metal spoon or something else, because bark, similar to kind of, I guess, rawhide, responds to heat. One of the mistakes that people make when they're trying to use birch bark, or any kind of bark for that matter, for the first time, is they think it's like paper. It's not. Bark has its own natural kind of curl and direction and grain and things like this, because it's wood at the end of the day. So you have to follow the grain properly, or else you're going to end up in kind of a world of nightmare, okay? So let me grab the bark out of the water now that it's kind of relaxed, because it was getting a little bit dried out, and we're going to apply the glue. Okay guys, so first thing we're going to have to do before we do anything else is we're going to have to heat up the indu, okay? So I'm going to just turn on the heat and leave it like that. If yours is like mine and has a wooden handle, make sure to keep that away from the heat. But this thing is really, really thick as far as the metal is concerned, so it's going to take some time to get to the proper temperature. So we want to get this going early while we take care of the other elements, okay? So now what we're going to do is get a piece of birch bark out. Now, one thing important to know is, like, this is technically the outside. Bark has a tendency when it's like off the tree to peel away from the tree. So this is the outer side of the bark and this is the inner side of the bark. Now, technically you can use whichever side you prefer. There's no right or wrong answer here. I mean, some people like to do this just because it's easy, since it's already kind of curling this way. Some people claim that the outer bark is more protective because, you know, naturally it's supposed to be on the outside. You know, some people don't care and so they just kind of mix and match. But whatever may be the case, we're going to dry this off a little bit because there's just a little too much water in here. But you can see how now the bark is quite pliable, and it's not going to get brittle on you. It was kind of a pain to obviously to get it to this point, but if you go through the steps that we talked about, this is what you're going to be able to work with. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be applying my glue on here and get it onto the arrow, and the next part is very, very crucial, where we're going to heat iron it, okay? But because we're dealing with heat and fire and whatever, again, fire warning, take all safety precautions as always. If you don't know what you're doing, then maybe this method is not going to be the best for you. But anyhow, let's do that. So now what I'm going to do is just like I mentioned earlier, apply the glue. So what I'm doing here is I'm using, basically kind of scrap pieces of paper to spread the glue, just because I don't want to get glue everywhere. So that all cleaned up. Now what I'm going to do is get my arrow, get the indu, and we're going to heat iron this little piece of bark on there. So guys, got my arrow now, got this ready to go, got the indu. One thing, when it's been sitting on the stove like that for a while, this is actually going to be too hot. If it's too cold, it won't actually work. But if it's also too hot, you'll instantly burn the bark, and it's gonna basically blow up like popcorn or instantly sear, and it's gonna crumble, okay? So when it's really, really burning hot like this, what you gotta do is dip it just gently, like for a half a second in water, okay? But before we do that, I'm going to pre-line up my bark onto here. Get it ready to go so that the moment this is ready, I can just start applying it, okay? Let that sizzle, right? Now, very carefully so we don't obliterate our fingers with the heat. Okay, just iron this thing on. So this is a lot like ironing clothing in the sense that the bark will respond to shaping. What's going on here fundamentally is that the glue that I use, the wood glue, is basically water soluble, right? By kind of boiling the bark like this, what happens is, of course, when you apply this wood glue on here, it's already impregnated with water, and so the glue kind of seeps into the bark. Then, when you apply just the correct amount of heat like this, the water evaporates out of the bark, leaving just the binding agent. And in doing so, we end up with something that actually ends up sticking. And of course, this is not a perfect thing in the sense that, like, every piece of bark, because it's natural material, is a little different. Every situation is a little different, and there is no absolute right amount of heat or right amount of time that you have to apply. I've noticed that this is the kind of thing where you just have to do it, maybe 10,000 times until you get good, and you do it enough and you will become a master. I by no means am a master at this, so hopefully though, what I'm doing is helpful for people. There's definitely been some instances where I put it on here and I didn't get it quite right, and I had to rip it off and do it all over again. So yeah, this is just one of those things where if you practice it a lot, you'll eventually get it down. If you have any spots that are kind of having some problems, you can just dip your finger in it, do this. This will reactivate the glue a little bit, right?
and then re-iron it or re-tamp it down like this. See that's, hear that sizzle, right? So it's really important, again, that you use a water-soluble glue to do this, because the glue has to be able to penetrate into the bark. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that birch bark, cherry bark, or any kind of bark for this kind of application, that it responds like paper, where if you just apply the glue, it just insta-soaks in. It doesn't. You have to actually go through all these annoying hoops just to make it work. And if you don't, you'll end up in kind of a bad situation where everything starts peeling. But there we go.
So there we go. 5 pieces of birch applied onto all 5 of my arrow shafts within the set. Just gonna wait for the glue to just finalize curing. It's basically done because it has such low water content at this point, but you know, you can see there's little bits like that still going. So probably wait till tomorrow just to, you know, kind of give it maximum time. So to finish this up, we're going to be using a little bit of high grit sandpaper, something hopefully over 1500 grit, a little bit of oil, and we're just gonna polish this up a little bit so that we can get rid of kind of this rough texture, okay? So it doesn't take a whole lot, guys, just a little bit of, you know, a little bit of sanding like this will do the trick. And then there you go, nice and clean. And then we're just gonna wipe off the excess oil. And there you go. Birch bark applied behind our wooden sleeve. Nice and clean. So guys, I did all 5 of my arrows, and you can see how everything is nice and oil polished now. You know, the oil has penetrated into both the wood and the bark, and as a result, it now has this kind of slightly iridescent, kind of aged look to it, which is really nice. But anyways, so yeah, I hope that's helpful. This is how you apply birch bark to your arrow so that it sticks tightly and does not peel and will, you know, and will last a long time. So I hope that was helpful.